culture.
Mind your culture.
My culture.
Culture and mind.
So my name is Michaela Kavdanska, or Mika. That's a shorter version of it. And first of all, I want to thank to Hygin for inviting me tonight, and also to Inge, with whom we know each other since quite a while. And we also worked a bit together, but we more have intentions to work together because I really like working with choreographers and dancers. I'm in my background, I am a visual artist. I have a very traditional training in fine arts from early 90s. And after that, I'm Bulgarian, but I graduated the Academy of Arts in Bucharest. And by the end of the 90s, actually, me and my colleagues, we started being very involved in media arts and more into experimental stuff. And everything was somehow at the beginning of happening in Bucharest. All these new media things and visuals for music and electronic underground music. So we were very excited about it. And I think that since then, we also started being very interested into video installations and video art and so on and so forth. And then a bit later, we got interested into connecting different art forms, like connecting experimental music with live visuals, for example. And because before, the other people who were invited were talking a lot about that one artist has to do different things all the time. Yes, from the very beginning, we were also organizers of events. We were doing our creative work. We were also working for clients as graphic designers or as video designers. And then we were also doing cultural management and all these things. So for me and my generation from Romania, it was somehow normal that we do this late 90s and beginning of 2000. And then somehow naturally came into the stage this connection with interactive art and interactive video projections. And in 2009, in our little company, which we have in Bucharest, but also with what we were doing with our NGO, we started producing and presenting and creating projects related to interactive art. Around 2011, this interactive art was not anymore so interesting to us to have it only connected to the public, because when you have public participation in interactive art, you cannot really control it. I mean, you couldn't by then control it too much. Now you can control things differently because the technology is so different. And then we were like, okay, it would be very interesting to connect all these things, what we are doing, with a dancer or with a performer. And because in Bucharest, the most coherent artistic community was the contemporary dance one, we somehow got connected with them, and they were super enthusiastic to jump in, and we started creating projects. So everything what I'm talking about until now is either super low budget created or no budget, because we were also discussing about fundings and so on. In Romania, by that time, there were no fundings. So no fundings. We were having a side job, we were having our clients for commercial projects, and we were like, not driving, but like riding 3 or 4 horses in a row, because we wanted to, to have our commercial projects, to finance our art projects, and to organize a festival, and to organize other things, and to bring people together. And actually, since that time, I'm also very used to working collectives. So at least 2 people or 3 people, and always people who have completely different expertise. And I find this extremely interesting. Also, because you had a question about what can we learn from other disciplines. Yes, I learned a lot from other disciplines, and it's also this horizontal hierarchy, which is very important. And then in 2011, we started really working very closely with contemporary dancers, with theater, with performers, and so on and so forth. And of course, everything including technology, because we wanted to have projection on moving body of course, in 2012, 2013, no one basically from the independent art scene was doing something like this. Or we were doing, but in parallel, developing things and no one was showing it. So my first project, which was which was like made with projection on moving body, like video mapping on moving body, was shown at Ars Electronica, but it was so low cost project and so high maintenance and so complicated that after it we decided to focus more on concepts. And this is what you will see in the works on this screen, where we present a project from 2017, which was a series yeah, of 5 site-specific performative interventions in 5 different spaces in Bucharest. This was this project was funded with 12 or 15,000 euro for around 15 artists involved, 5 events and 1 conference. So, but still, we were totally underpaid, but everyone was so happy to work on it. And yeah, it's always like, it's been always like this. So this is a project in which we decided to work on concepts more than on the technology. We really literally copy pasted the same technology, the same interactive projection in all 5 locations, but then focusing on how site specific it is, on the connection between the performers and the projections and so on and so forth. Then we recycle this one and we present, because it's also this point of, okay, how often? So you work on one project, we were discussing earlier with Inge about this. You work on one project for, let's say, half a year, and then you show it once and it's gone. And of course you don't feel very motivated. So this one we showed in a Memphis gallery in Linz during Ars Electronica as part of the festival in 2018. And it was very interesting actually to create it in a bigger place. And I think it's not recycling, but this is building up of over a project. And I think it's important to do something like this. So here we had this Mondrian interpretation with video mapping, and everything what is in the projection is live projection and comes from the cameras which the performers are connecting with and using as prolongation of their hands. This is another project which we created for the Tanzhafen Festival in Linz. Maybe you know it. This is in the deep space. And this is again an interesting, here we use again the same technology, but with completely different dancers, completely different concept, and of course different art direction. So from 2015-16, we really decided to stop developing technology because it's expensive, because it's very hard, because it's very frustrating, and to try to use it in many different ways. And we found this much more sustainable. And so this, and then somewhere from the Spaces Alive project, which was 5 different performances in Bucharest, we wanted to involve augmented reality. So we wanted to leave the performances somehow living in the spaces after the performative interventions. And we didn't manage that. So we just couldn't manage it because we didn't have the money to film the performances on green screen, what we had for this project, which is the second project, which is from last year. And we just waited. And this project actually is another big endeavor in which there were 14 people involved. Me and my colleague from the DARF team, Violeta Ivanova, we created a conceptual framework for interventions in public spaces, especially on staircases. It's a project completely created in COVID times and with COVID restrictions, and it was really marked by the pandemic. It came out completely different as work process and as result as we wanted. But here we had the opportunity with Austrian fundings. So yeah, I have to say that since I moved to Austria, things are a bit different, and I wouldn't complain at all. So here, the idea was that there are two different groups which created each and every one of them, their concept in the frame of our concept. One of the, I mean, you will, if you look at it, you will see that one of them is very connected to the gender roles and queer tango and blurring the gender roles. And the other, and also they also made a manifesto against masculinity. And the other project, this one, is related to the status of the migrant women in Austria. That's why it's called Not Here, Not There. So all this uncertainty and so on. And this little trailer represents our work process and a bit the result. And we are at the moment we are working on a documentary, in which we have a bit more going deeper into the posture. Sorry, this is from my yoga teaching into the project. And over there, I have one more work. No, this one is just one more, which is my own performance meditating on escalators. And this was, again, like it's a video installation, but it's also an interactive installation, and it's also a performative intervention in public space. So you can have a look.
Thank you so much. That was lovely.
I was just mesmerized by the video, so I think it's super distracting. So I think what I did, the work that is there, came from the question of if liveness cannot happen. I mean, I was in Stockholm at University of the Arts, and we had just the possibility of having 5 people or maximum 5, but it was never 5. Let's say 8 people live seeing the performance, and other people needed to be digital. And we were constantly having to merge these 2 formats, people being live and people being on Zoom, because there were people in Australia studying. They were just stranded in different countries. So I started working with that question: what can I do if live performance cannot happen? And I started to relate, because endless Zoom, I started to relate with the frame of the camera. And I started filming conferences and try to understand the different spaces that are there. There is my physical space, and there is the space of the Zoom. And this, it was very interesting to merge those 2 realities. And so we had to present our work or our practices, and my practice is an interest in several perspectives and in questioning the frontality of the body. And so I started to understand how I can work with my body and how to go beyond the physical logic of my body through the screen, and to question the flatness of the screen and the sense of touch that is not happening through the screen. And that was a question during the pandemic that was like difficult to deal with for performers. So I started to have several screens and to work with mirrors and to see where is my image being kind of in other spaces. So I worked with spaces inside spaces, and to create more room and different perspectives inside that flatness. And the other thing that for me was very interesting is to maintain a presence now with a virtual audience. How can that happen? And how can I work with not knowing and unpredictability within a digital format? Because film is something that is, let's say, people are not so interested in seeing filmed performances because they are not happening now. How this nowness, this presence, can be guided by my gaze, by the way I see, how I relate to that frame of the camera, and how I guide the attention. In that manner, I am connected with the people digitally, like through the gaze. So the combination between virtuality and in a very analog way was for me very, very interesting. To, yeah, also bridging live audiences and digital audiences.
Hello, my name is Inge, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to my work. I started to encounter the digital space or being busy with the digital space because I'm very much interested in how do structures that surround us inform the body, and how can then the body actively react to the structures which are surrounding the body. So this can be concrete architectural structures, but also thinking structures, politics, social structures. And I started this research with actually first doing my bachelor thesis on dance in public space, where I encountered then the spatial sociology, where it's really on like we as human beings divide time and space and organize ourselves in time and space. And so it's a big topic which somehow I sucked in and is really, really informing what I'm doing and how I think dance and choreography and the body and how we, yeah, So the first work I would love to introduce to you is, wait a second, it's this one. Yes, so there's the trailer already. It's a performance which is a duet with myself because I didn't want to do a precarious solo out of no funding. So I did a duet with myself. And the main interest, my first interest was self-isolation, which started in 2017, just saying that. And the premiere should have happened in March 2020. The postponed premiere should have happened in November 2020. So it never happened, actually. But we got from support to do it digitally or to make a video. And I saw it as a very logical, dramaturgical thing to actually do the performance then if I'm already dealing with self-isolation and how do this communication via mainly social media and not going to theater anymore, to just connect to the talk before. I'm dealing there with, or one main inspiration was the first chatbot called Eliza by Joseph Weizenbaum in 1966. So it's the very first chatbot, what we all know now, like Siri, Alexa, and all this stuff. And he actually did it as a joke and programming a therapist. So you start to have an inner monologue. And so this is the motivation for the piece, Protect. There is no wind in geometrical worlds. And the video we did in a way that it's like also jumping from a camera, filming from the outside, but also a camera moving with me in space. Yeah, so the logics of self-isolation in a way. Then there is a small short video, which is 1 minute and 22 seconds. It's called Woman Walking Down the Side of a Screen. Since I'm always filming myself when I work on a solo to just get an outside eye, at one point happened that I clicked on recording and then turned the video. So I saw myself walking down the side of a screen and thought, well, that's familiar to me because there was this performance by Trisha Brown who had the man walking down the side of a building. So I was looking up when did that performance happen, and it happened that it was just like a few weeks before the 50 years anniversary of that piece. And I got an invitation back then by Brut, who said, okay, we need to do things online, April 2020. So I said, well, I'm gonna do that video. And by that, actually, since there's a description there, Trisha Brown putting the man on the building, questioning how we perceive people in public space. So I dealt there with in my bachelor thesis back then. Me wondering now what effect does it have when we see people on screens in minimized versions and just out of gravity and whatever there is. And then the third piece, which is just next to it, is and not running at the moment. It's on pause, but it's okay. It's a piece I could produce with 3 other dancers at Cosmos Theater 2021. And suddenly doors opened and we could show it, but we still applied already for funding to put it online or to make a digital version out of it. And it's a piece called Gate, where I also questioned the format of frontal stage and wanted to have audience on 3 sides of, so like the stage being a 6-sided thing, and on 3 sides having the audience with an installation also as the stage design and so on. So what we did in the end to make a digital experience of that piece happening, having 4 cameras like on 3 sides, but also one on top. And I have this amazing colleague called Robert Lessig, who is just, he does everything you ask him, like technically. He finds solutions for everything. So he could program that when watching the performance, you can choose your own camera perspective. So you can watch the performance happening, but you choose your own perspective. So it's not frontal, and it's very, you can, as in also talking about active and passive audience, of course, there's this, now I forgot it, but it's the intelligent audience also. And I think like having the capacity to guide your own gaze, this is what I somehow tried to make possible with that. And I think now I'm finishing. Thank you very much.
Please, Inge. There are also other artworks like Michael Leutzenbauer, the member of Liquid Loft, who is not here today because he has COVID. He has a bunch of examples of his work on this screen. And that movie that you see, we did like a few days ago with Marcin and Mika together, and with me, with Mariana Chlebus. This is a movie by the Body Architects, by us. A short, it's not a big production, it's just a short expression, but beautifully edited by Nicola. And then there is the other movie by another people from our organization, Elias Troy-Buttinger and Wendy Troy-Buttinger, as well as Vaughan Seikei, and they also did analogous film just in Upper Austria. So these are the 2 other films. And then there is one more artist who is not here, Lisa Magnan. She has a very she's also a video choreographer artist. She has a very interesting CV hanging on this screen, a video CV, very interesting. I find this personally, very interesting. And then she also has another movie that you see on this screen. This panel is about using digital media. Already you told me a lot of different examples of how to use digital media, and I think this is really interesting. So my first question would be, there's been a period of isolation called pandemic. Did it give you something? Did you learn something from this period of reliance on digital media? Did it take your art further, or what kind of effect did it have on your art and on your creativity?
I mean, for me, it kind of started the practice that I have because it arose from the pandemic, from being forced to using to communicate digitally your art and to find new ways of doing that. So it actually pushed creativity in different ways, and it developed really my practice. So I think the pandemic was very positive in that regard. It opened new doors and new solutions. Because when there is confrontation and problematics, the problematics really always have the potential of new ways of thinking and new pathways. So for me, it was very positive and interesting times to be with questioning kind of traditional ways of doing things and solving things.
I somehow was busy with that before, so it hit me like very, very practically, as I said before, also being like having this piece on self-enclosure and suddenly being on my own in the studio and knowing, okay, the world is just changing, everybody is self-isolated, so what the fuck? Sorry for that. But it gave me like the postponements of the premiere. It gave me half a year longer to work on it and to reflect on it and to just see what's happening when this is all there. And I got a more positive relationship to these digital things, because I think without these possibilities of having Zoom and so on, we would have lived through the lockdowns quite differently. And so for me, it was really a challenge, like also to doing this video work, the tribute to Trisha Brown. I wouldn't have done it otherwise, or I could not have published it. And the other performance, then the digital version, because in the end, when we showed Gate with a frontal audience, because it was just, keeping separated the stage and the audience and being on distant, we couldn't have done it in this installative setting. So we had frontal audience when we showed it live, which was like just not, it's completely different. So the digital version now helps to actually see it more as I planned it. So it's kind of, interesting what happened. Yeah.
And from from my perspective, it was very good because I completely abandoned every day the screen and my work, and I went out in nature. And from the first lockdown, I have so many photos of flowers and nature. I've never done something like this before. So on one hand, okay, I'm joking, but I'm not. So it made me get a bit of a distance between me and my work. I also was looking how different projects are just falling apart. And I'm like, okay, this is not happening. This gets postponed. Oh, no, it's not happening anymore. This gets postponed. Oh, it's not happening. So like, it was really... And then some things were falling. Others are getting developed. During the pandemic, it was the first time when we got proper rehearsal slots in the deep space of Ars Electronica Center, which never happened before. Like the project which is here was one of the projects was created in 5 sessions of rehearsals of 2 hours, including technical setup, which is just a nightmare. And during the pandemic in 2020, we were the only project happening in the deep space, and we had so many days of rehearsals, And I was like, that's so lucky. That's so lucky. I mean, of course, we had to change this project like 4 or 5 times from June until the end of August, because the Korean performers were supposed to come, then they couldn't come, then they were only one was coming, then the choreographer went, but he couldn't come back, she couldn't come back, and it was like a complete mess. So we also learned a lot how to adapt and how to become even more flexible than we were before. And of course, dealing with low budgets. And last but not least, in this Steps Untold project, which is with the stairs, that completely ruined our work process as we wanted it. And then we had to learn to just let go and just, say, okay, now we go with the flow and we do whatever we can and let's see what happens. And really, like, I was thinking before that adventure, I mean, my perception about adventure completely changed during the pandemic. So that was my experience.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something. Like, there was also the redefinition of what, like in my case, of what a studio space is. And how because we could not access studio space, what can replace a studio space? And I started working in public space, and I was forced or invited to find new strategies of bridging different spaces and different practices, and because I'm exposed to other conditions. When you're in public space, things are at a very different exposure, different conditions, different.
Yeah, I know that it's about you and not about me, but I started doing a lot of things in the pandemic that I wouldn't never have time to do before. Least one of this is this, and I discovered a passion for it, and I discovered passion for this as well. So, of course, very negative, but also sometimes very positive time. And I also discovered that somehow the whole world changed, and somehow people don't look at the dance the same way, or people don't look at the I don't know, going somewhere to see something in the same way. And I'm just curious, because like, then what is the answer? What is our answer to this problem? Because I mean, sure, you're kind of, I would say, Michaela and Inge and Adriana, maybe you're like one, or maybe even myself, like maybe we're like one step ahead because we're already doing something in that direction. But I wonder how do we change? How do we change to adapt to this new world? Or do you even perceive it like this?
I think that's very individual. It's not, there is like, it's not possible to kind of talk or express a we. I think it's important to, I mean, there are different contexts, different practices, and there is not one way of solving in the world, like, or facing this problematic, or so I don't think it's about, from this perspective, to say we are a step ahead or something like this, because it's just one way of solving or of relating and dealing with it. But there are plenty of other ways, or people that realize how important live performance is and how they have insisted in live performance also outside of theater spaces. But just practicing that liveness, which is as valid as finding other formats.
I mean, is it really so new? I'm asking
I don't think
myself,
so.
like,
I don't think so.
Because now we are somehow back to what it was before. I mean,
Yeah.
somehow. And of course, lots of projects went in public space. So, for example, creating augmented reality in public space is much different than in controlled environment. And we had this problem also. I mean, not problem, but it was quite of a challenge. And of course, we had to learn new things, and now we somehow stay with them and keep doing things in public space. So I think that bringing art and performance and media art in public space somehow is very good also for the public and for our connection with the public. So I think from this perspective is somehow positive, or because before you kind of needed a reason. Now, of course, you also need a conceptual reason, but you can solve it very easily with site-specific thing. Yeah. So site-specific performance in public space, or a performance with a public participation, with audience participation in public space.
I like how pragmatic you are about this.
I think one has to be, like
behind the
in order
poetry.
to keep on doing and not getting lost. I also maybe want to add, like, for me, because this question of, okay, how does this pandemic now change the way we think theater, or we look at dance or other bodies? I mean, I think that really influenced how we encountered. So I had that really sitting in the studio and being like, damn it, what am I? It's my theme somehow, and how to solve that now. And at the same time, this was one of the, when the first lockdown and everything came, I somehow felt an euphoria also of being like, wow, now things have to change finally. Because for me, it was really this, I don't know, or my generation of this, everything is already fixed, it's standardized.
The game is rigged.
And it's like, that's how you deal with it. Somehow everybody tells you, you do it like this, you do it like this. And it's really like, okay, now we really have to come together, even though we cannot, but think about, or be like, go home and think about it, how you want to live, and how we want to live together. And I think it's a great opportunity to really also rethink the machinery of theater making and being in a black box, and what this is, what it means to really meet in person and encounter something on the street, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to technology, new media strategy, or maybe I use the word new media strategy. It's so vague and I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I'm just wondering, maybe the question is, what is new media strategy for you, or what is technology for you, and where can art making benefit from it? So what is the great thing about, what are the great strategies or great technological advancement nowadays that we can benefit from it? Like, we can of course skip the obvious one, such as, oh, now we can meet on Zoom. But let's say, what is if we go one step beyond, let's say, where do you see that you're using technology in an intelligent and creative way? Does it make any sense?
Yeah.
I think for me, technology is not somehow in the equation, even though if I work, or I, in this project See-Through, I started working with it. It's not from that point of view of what technology, what I can reach through technology. It's a different approach. It's a very analog approach that I'm interested in. Let's say my question of how can I, like the question of communicating and bridging different audiences, for example, of trying to find a connection between people online, people live, people passing by on the street. What would that be artistically? What is the possibility of bridging that? Of, not because I want to reach more audience, but because the clash of the different spaces is interesting to me. So from that, I say, okay, how can this image be there? But as soon as I am, for example, in dialogue with people from technology, they want to solve the problem in a technological way, which is less interesting artistically to me. So what is interesting to me is this analog aspect of transferring my knowledge into other media, because then the other media get also influenced by my performativity or my understanding of my body. So I find that, yeah, that's my approach, and that's what I find interesting.
For me, it's really like, also like not the technical aspects. I'm like, if I think it's great that developers and so on made it possible that we all can use this stuff now, and as an artist also just playing with them and playing with the limits of it, and exactly like clashing them or making them sort of another body in space or a tool to use. And just also one thought I had, I wanted to add is, for example, with Protect the solo, I never showed live. In this way, suddenly people from another who didn't live in Vienna could see it. And I mean, so there's so many curious things that technology now opens up of possibilities also. This is very fascinating for me. And so that's the kind of things how I want to use these technologies. Being like making things accessible and connecting in a different way because you cannot physically or something.
For me, technology was always a tool to connect different art forms and input and data from different art forms in order to create a new art form. And I find this very interesting when the concept is what is guiding me and not the technology itself. Now, I mean, it depends also what kind of new technologies for production of art or for dissemination of art or for promotion of art, because they're very different.
Tell me all of them. I'm curious.
Okay. So
I'm curious. Like you're an expert. Like, can you tell me like what is nowadays cutting edge
well,
in each of those fields that you?
what is cutting edge and is very boring for me is using artificial intelligence. And not the artificial intelligence per se, but how it's used and the intention and the concepts in which it's used. So very rarely you can see artificial intelligence used in a performative way, which really makes sense and makes you think, oh, wow, that's really a work of art. So from my perspective, every time when we use technology, first and foremost, it should give you a feeling of a work of art, not of another gadget which is put on stage and we have to, admire the development of technology. I'm not interested in that. But I'm really interested in also educating young artists how to, and that's why we do also workshops, how to approach and how to relate to it. And that's why in our workshops, always we offered the technology. We offered a tool for video mapping. We offered augmented reality platform to the students so they can really have this solved and they can really think of the concept and of all the artistic relations between the different art forms. And I mean, augmented reality, I really prefer working with augmented reality than virtual reality in media art and performance, because with augmented reality, I can still connect with what is there. I can still make this aha moment, I can still create this aha moment because the viewer stays in the here and now, in the real reality, instead of being completely gone when they put the VR glasses, And like since 2011, let's say, there've been lots of interesting developments in using augmented reality as artistic tool. And we also tried this, we did it in the Steps Untold project, because and exactly like creating another dramaturgical layer and digital performers having performing in another reality, but still connected to the what is here and now. And for example, I find this very, very interesting and also very creative somehow, and giving a lot of room for interpretation. Now, there are lots of other, artificial intelligence, what I said at the moment, every project which is art and science and technology, which is labeled with AI, is already getting the funding, is getting into Ars Electronica or any other big festival. And not so many are very interesting. By the way, they will be, you can all come to the Ars Electronica Festival this year, and there will be lots of interesting projects. And the majority of them many of them are with AI, and the vast majority are connected to climate change. So this is a huge topic at the moment. And I think it's also very interesting when we talk about technology to connect it somehow to climate change. No? I mean,
Ironic.
because our bad karma of using technology and traveling a lot to, with planes and so on, we can somehow balance it out with, using this, having this kind of topics and saying, okay, sorry, we use technology, but
look at the
We're doing
message.
about climate change.
yeah.
We communicate the message.
And another thing which I think is really important, what you also say about the analog approach, it's very interesting for me, and I think it's also very useful for the audience to combine analog approach with digital approach or technological approach in the same project. So they can still have a haptic experience, have a sensorial experience of a life, of living something that just connecting to a screen. And I think this is very good as approach also, to have these two components.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is all very interesting. I noticed suddenly that maybe I just overslept something, but I noticed that suddenly, not everyone, but a lot of people are extremely good at, video, for example, or image-based things. So I noticed that suddenly everyone is like, it used to be that everyone now is photographer because everyone has a phone and can do photos, but now, today, everyone is a video maker, and everyone is an excellent video maker almost, so it's really interesting, like how this shift happens, and like when do you, how to say, when are you still an artist? I don't know how to explain this, because if everyone can do it, now it's not anymore about the craft. What makes it artistic, for example? I don't know if I say this.
Yeah, but I
correct.
think we don't have a photographer here and not a video maker. So I think
Yeah.
they will say, well, of course, everybody can do it. Like also, I don't know, everybody can dance, and I really trust
Yeah.
in that. But what is an artistic approach then, and how to put it into context? And I think there's still things to develop, and there's always this question of, is it art, or I mean, we have it in German, ist es Art oder ist es Kunst oder kann das weg? I mean, it's always a personal, yeah, I'm very much inspired by nature, so it's the best artist. Like,
No, I also find there is a difference between craft and art. Not necessarily a person that has craft in something or is a good photographer or a good video artist or a good dancer is an artist for me. So I think there are many artists that are not able to execute perfectly the movements, but they understand, they have a sense of composition, or they understand, yeah, the sense of what it means to create. They have a reason why to create, and that makes the difference between craft and I think that's recognized also.
And could you tell me a little bit about the barrier of entry? So let's say I have this, what it takes. Let's say I'm an artist, and I'm interested in working with, let's say, AR or VR, or I don't know, AR or VR, let's say, or AI. That's beautiful. Everything that has two letters, it sounds sexy. So
there's a
let's
piece
say,
on 3 letters, like using
Yeah.
3 letters by Willy Dorner.
yeah, well, let's say I'm interested in 2 letters kind of based work. Like my question is like, what is the barrier of entry? Like, do I have to be an excellent coder? Do I have to, how long do I have to spend on it? And how much do I have to spend on it financially in order to engage in kind of art making? Let's say the low technical level art making that includes the 2-letter component, 2-letter based component.
I mean, if you work with in a collective, as I work, everyone is doing what they're good at. I don't do coding, but I'm a familiar with softwares, because after our programmer finishes the software, then I have to rehearse with it with the dancers, and I have to also be able to change how the visuals look like until I like how they look like. So you have to be somehow familiar. And I think that these very complex projects, it's not so often that you have a coder who has just, I mean, not just, but like a coder it's a lot of work to be a good coder. So it's not so easy, even if like these days there are softwares which are intuitive to be used by artists, and you just have to learn how to put different boxes and connect them. That's much easier than a real programmer, real programming work. Even this requires a lot of time. So I mean, I think it's best to work with people who are passionate coders, who are passionate for arts, and they want to work with artists, and they're super bored with their programmers jobs. Then they take it, and they can also agree for not so big payment, because that's the situation. So this is one way. And another way is, a project like can be, I don't know, 10,000, but it can be also 100,000. It depends also how much research is involved in it. It depends if you use a platform which is already created and you just customize it for the needs of your project, or you want to develop something completely new. So and I mean, I know also a couple of examples of artists who do everything on their own, but they also sometimes, very often, they have assistants, because there are many things to do around it, because it's also the funding and applications and managing the project and organization and so on. So I think that's why it's so spread that and so popular, people to work in collectives these days. And because for example, for our programmer Florian, who is in Darv, the things we required as artists were so simple. He was like, I do this in 10 minutes, and actually I can see that you use it in such an interesting way than a little app would use it. So he also decided to put his efforts in creating, on a very low budget, an augmented reality open source app, which is especially for artists. So we have now this app, and basically everyone can work with it. It will be completely developed until September, and then it's an open source. People can use it. You can perform. You can put things in public space. So it's really. And then you will say, okay, now everyone can do augmented reality, but where is the art? And then it comes the good moment of ideas, concepts, and really artistic work, because you don't have to struggle with the technology. It's there, and then the competition is on a different level. And I think that's very, very good and very constructive somehow.
Yeah, that kind of where is the art was always my question, but that's a long time ago. Probably might be different. I arrived to Linz in 2009, and I've been to Ars Electronica Center a lot, and I've seen a lot of things, and they were usually focused on what can the technology do. Look, we put a sensor here, and now there's something reacts to the sensor. Like that was usually the level on which I saw the work. But now when I see for example, the installation of the stairs, and it's very different. It's a different kind of work, and I think maybe it just needs this time to adapt and to mature, and maybe it's the same with kind of Zoom performing, or different ways of using this, I don't know, this post-pandemic solutions. Maybe they also have to mature, and they also have to become about actually what you do with them.
Yeah, sure. But I think that from 2009 until like in the last 10 years, a lot of things changed.
Tons.
So people are using technology really in an artistic way, because exactly, they don't have to struggle with it so much anymore. So
Okay.
And I think being an artist,
Please.
like I wanted to say, maybe for me, it's a way of living. And it's exactly like struggling and seeing like, okay, you can still struggle with things in order to find new ways and cracks and like this, and developing own practices, like, and making that then a craft and like new strategies.
What have you learned? Let's say it's a bit difficult questions, maybe mostly to Inge and Adriana, but maybe to also you, Michaela. What have you learned? What is the learning from using technology? Let's say from working in the technological context. What like other realization you came up to, for example, or have there been?
I learned, for example, that really performing for a camera, it's exhausting. Like, it's really horrible. Yeah, because I also wanted to interact with the audience and mirror them or something. It was like, okay, I just try to imagine they're here and there's someone, and it's just like, wow. So really, like, the presence of bodies, I really realized, and maybe we all realized how much it does. And I learned, like, really, I entered the project very, very critically with what does this all do with us, and now I really see also the positive sides and how to use them. So I also, learned to appreciate more what it really means to make a movie and a film. So I had to somehow engage with that art form, and it's like, yeah, I'm a choreographer and not a video maker. Like, so I think that's kind of what I learned, or what I'm interested in, like, exactly what can that thing do, how can we encounter, and how can we how can I challenge that, no, and use it.
For me, actually, it has been very positive because I realized that working with film is the same as working with, it's working with composition, and it's working with what is there in the image. And because I worked with liveness, meaning that there were people, or it was very interesting to have that possibility of being alone in a space and still know that I'm being observed. And it came also out of a question, or before, I wanted also to see if presence is somehow dictaminated by an audience. And I find it fascinating to be performing alone in a space and still very connected to the audience, and that the audience can be kind of in that tension of what is going to happen. How can I be in that state of not knowing and connect with the audience through that frame? So for me, it has potentialized my creativity, and also because filming and moving, there is many connections between how you use the camera and how the movement and the awareness and the consciousness and the way you see the world is translated in the camera, and how you touch through how you touch, I mean, the body, the eyes of the camera, and the surrounding. And so what is this connection and the bridge that you make? For me, is wonderful. And then back, how is this what I film informing me back? And how, for example, can my body then incorporate that practice of filming? And so it's very interesting, the possibilities that it has opened. Or for example, in public space, I thought always, okay, because I work with frame, what is it to be in a window display and be working at shifting the perspectives, be visible by people passing by that are not meant to see art, but they are being also filmed, or they are part of their reality while I'm connected to another audience. So it just opens the possibilities of how to bridge further. So for me, wonderful. Because it doesn't cut the wings.
Yeah, I think I really can connect and resonate to what you say, Adriana, because opening possibilities and different worlds and different layers is very easy with technology. But then, with the use of technology, but then my main topic of my research was always this intermediate oneness. How do you get from all these vast possibilities and connecting different art forms and their manifestation into an experience which is kind of an intermediate oneness experience for us as artists and for the audience as participating or passive audience. And then another interesting thing for me, it's been always this liveness of the thing, because as you can have liveness in performance, you can have it also in digital art. And when you have a connection between live performance and digital performance and digital performers and live performers, for me this is very interesting. And how can you relate all these things? And now someone can ask, but why digital? Yeah, because digital is just everywhere. And we as artists have the opportunity to give also a different perspective to this digital. That's why we also we are interested in augmented reality as artists, because you give a completely different perspective to the audience when you show them a different experience of augmented reality than I don't know, the new app from IKEA, which is placing different furniture in your home when you look at in your room, you know. So I think this has a great potential to change the perspective of the audience to their devices, because these devices became like 24/7 part of our life. And I think our role as an artist is very important also to somehow change the I mean, you know that there is this syndrome of cognitive impatience these days, these years actually. What we try to do is to somehow question it and somehow make people to think about this cognitive impatience which we all have when we look actually at an artwork in augmented reality and or just as a video on a screen. And if it's also like when you make something interactive or not in real time, this is also this is also possible because of technology. So I think that when we want to connect all the layers and manifestations of this world we live in, which became super complex, using technology as a tool, I think it can be very productive, creative, and even changing the viewpoint of the audience and of ourselves also, because you can discover so many things. Like you have so many aha moments. And another thing, what we learned with my colleagues is to live with failure. Failure, because the technology can always leave you. Like you can always have bugs, you can always have something not working. Like so many festivals, like interactive art became famous as art which was not working when you wanted it to work, you know? And that can be so frustrating. But then you somehow make from defect, effect, and you learn to live with this failure of technology. So I think that's also a good lesson. Well, now I look at it with sense of humor, but when you have it at a big exhibition or event in the last moment, you don't want to go through this.
Yeah, technology always fails. I think it's for me the most wonderful experience of failing is always live streaming. Live streaming is a beautiful, beautiful canvas for failure, I would say.
Okay.
There's like connecting the audio sources and video sources together, and then computer doesn't react to this for no reason whatsoever. And I imagine if you do interactive art, it's like this, but even more.
Yeah, it's even more complex because, for example, you do an interactive installation which is for how is it called? Like for less than 5 users. You want to do it for 1 user, but you didn't have the time, because usually we never have time, to test it. And then it's in the exhibition, and then you have to do basically live coding, and we are all like with our hairs like up, because you have to do live coding, because you suddenly have a completely different movement of the audience around your installation. And then you have to really foresee all the different scenarios. And of course, to rehearse them is like in performing arts. And to rehearse them and to see, okay, here we have this bug and that bug. And then when it starts, it has to be functioning as you want it. So that's why in 2014, I was talking to our program and I was like, you know what, we do the simplest interactive installation possible, which was this video with the with the escalator. So the idea was that there is only 1 user sitting in front of the screen, in front of the camera, and with face detection, and which is detecting if he's moving or not, the video was starting and running or stopping. So it couldn't be more simple. And this one was super funny for the kids, actually, because they were like, oh, now I move, it stops, and now I stay. And the parents were really like, can we have this for home? because
It works
if
on them.
the video, if the video is running only when they stay still, and the kids were really like staying still.
This should be included in YouTube, honestly.
Yes. So it's
Actually, I have to say, I think technology always works. It's just we're sometimes too impatient to just stay with it because it's programmed. It doesn't decide. No, I'm not working now. If it's breaking down, yes. But in general, if you use a program or something, it's programmed. It has been tested normally if you didn't develop it yourself.
yes, sure.
I love
mainly
your faith,
it's actually
Inge.
us.
Yeah, sometimes you use a program and it's supposed to work. Like, for example, I used the QLC software for the lights, for the light management or light design. And then you think, oh, it's working, it's perfect, I did everything perfect. And then suddenly one light turns on, like for no reason, because there is a bug in the program.
That's different then.
But you never knew about this bug. It's not written anywhere. It's like, and then you spend like 30 or 40 minutes just figuring out, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And then suddenly you realize, no, I didn't do anything wrong. There is a bug, but I wasted, so much time on it. But yeah, generally it should work, like you say. It generally works.
No, it's just you have to stay to the script, and not improvise.
Yeah.
But also I find it very interesting what technology for the lack, for example, in my case, working with the problems when, for example, there is darkness and the film is not properly working and it's pixelated. It's a very interesting aesthetic. Instead of wanting technology to work at what it is supposed to work for, at its best, and the optimizing the light or whatever. So the problematics are very interesting.
I also had very interesting conversations with the video maker from the from the video of Protect, because it was like, it has to be dark. It's like, no, it has to be rough and dusty and everything. It's like, no. So interesting conversations. They're very similar. Sorry.
If you're watching this online, please appreciate by subscribing to our channel and leaving a positive review or so on like this. I hope we're gonna have more wonderful conversations like this. I'm really thankful to all of you who stayed with us for so long, being so brave, being so patient, and there is a reward. And the reward is